Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. The smell of burnt ozone clung to the air as Captain Elias Vance wrenched open the escape pod's emergency hatch. Smoke billowed out, revealing the battered, barely conscious figure of an alien woman slumped inside. Her sleek, violet skin was marred with deep gashes, and her breathing was ragged. Elias had seen her species before, Zari, one of the elite warrior castes of the Viari Dominion. They were deadly, disciplined, and fiercely proud. And yet, here she was, on the verge of death, trapped inside a failing escape pod. "Hang in there," Elias muttered, slipping his arms under her. She was heavier than she looked, her lithe frame packed with dense muscle. As he hauled her out, she groaned, eyelids fluttering open. Golden, slit-pupiled eyes locked onto his. For a brief moment, confusion flickered across her face. Then something else. Recognition? Elias didn't have time to dwell on it. His ship's alarms were blaring. They had mere minutes before the enemy fleet would find them. He carried the alien woman aboard the Perseverance and sealed the airlock just as enemy fire rained down on the battlefield outside. Hours later, in the medical bay, the alien woman stirred. Elias had seen his fair share of battlefield wounds, and hers were severe. Yet, she was already healing at an unnatural pace. The med scanner beeped, confirming his suspicions: enhanced regenerative abilities. Her eyes snapped open. In an instant, she sat upright, despite the fresh wounds. "You are the one who saved me," she said, her voice smooth yet firm. Elias crossed his arms. "Yeah, and you're lucky I did. Your escape pod was barely holding together." She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she studied him, scrutinized him. Then, to his surprise, she placed her hand over her heart and bowed her head. "I am at your service." Elias blinked. What?" The alien woman lifted her gaze, her golden eyes sharp and unwavering. "You saved my life. According to the ancient laws of my people, I now belong to you." Elias let out a dry laugh. "That's not how this works. You don't—" "My name is Zari," she interrupted, her tone absolute. "And from this moment forward, I shall dedicate my existence to fulfilling your every need and desire." Elias stared at her. This was going to be a problem. Elias Vance ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, exhaling slowly. "Listen, Zari, I don't know what kind of customs your people have, but humans don't own people. You don't belong to me." Zari remained seated on the med bay bed, her golden eyes fixed on him. "It is not a matter of ownership. It is an oath. You saved my life. By the ancient code of the Viari, my existence is now devoted to you." Elias frowned. "Okay, but what does that mean exactly?" Zari tilted her head, as if he had asked something strange. "It means I will serve your needs. I will protect you, ensure your well-being, and provide for you in whatever way is necessary. You have but to speak your desires." Elias felt a strange unease settle in his gut. "And if I tell you to just live your own life?" Zari's expression didn't change. "Then my life will be dedicated to ensuring yours remains prosperous. That is my path now. There is no changing it." The firm conviction in her voice made Elias shift uncomfortably. This was no temporary gratitude. She believed this with every fiber of her being. "I don't need a servant," Elias said finally, crossing his arms. "I don't need a bodyguard. I just need you to get back on your feet and—" "I am already on my feet." Elias blinked, and in the span of a breath, Zari had risen, standing before him at her full height. She was taller than he'd expected, her athletic frame coiled with restrained strength. Despite her earlier wounds, there was no sign of weakness in her stance. "I heal quickly," she continued. "Already, my body has repaired the worst of the damage." Elias exhaled through his nose. "That's great, but I'm serious, Zari. I didn't save you expecting something in return." She hesitated. "That is strange." "What?" "Among my people, such an act would create a bond that cannot be undone. You risked yourself to save me, and so I devote my life to you. That is the way of things." Elias rubbed his temples. Well, that's not how things work here. Zari considered this, then asked, What do you desire, Captain Elias Vance? Elias snorted. Right now? A stiff drink and a long sleep. To his surprise, Zari nodded solemnly. Then I will arrange this for you. Before he could stop her, she strode past him, moving with an eerie grace. Elias turned, watching her exit the med bay. He sighed. This was going to be a headache. Later that night, Elias returned to his quarters, half expecting Zari to be waiting outside his door like some kind of overzealous guardian. Instead, the door slid open to reveal something he wasn't prepared for. His room was perfect. The normally cluttered space was spotless. The paperwork that had been scattered across his desk was neatly organized. His worn-out combat boots, previously kicked under the bed, were now cleaned and polished. A small tray sat atop his nightstand, containing a bottle of aged Terran whiskey and a glass with a single crystal-clear ice cube. Elias narrowed his eyes. Zari? From the shadows near the corner of the room, she stepped forward. I have fulfilled your desires, Captain. Elias pinched the bridge of his nose. Zari, I didn't mean... You requested a drink, she continued, gesturing toward the whiskey. And you require rest. Your body is fatigued. Elias eyed her warily. You didn't threaten anyone to get this whiskey, did you? Zari looked almost offended. Of course not. I simply located your most preferred brand in the ship stores and ensured it was delivered. Elias exhaled, running a hand down his face. Okay, look, I appreciate the effort, but you don't need to do any of this. I don't expect you to clean my room or fetch me drinks. Zari studied him, as if searching for the correct response. Then what do you expect of me? Elias hesitated. I don't know. I guess I just want you to be... yourself. A strange silence stretched between them. Finally, Zari spoke. This is myself. Elias met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw something deeper behind her unwavering loyalty. An unshakable certainty that this was her purpose. Not out of obligation, not out of submission, but because she believed it was right. He sighed. All right, fine. If you insist on this whole oath thing, at least take it easy. No need to turn my quarters into a 5-star resort. Zari inclined her head. Understood. Elias poured himself a glass of whiskey and sat down heavily on the edge of his bed. He had a feeling this was just the beginning, and for the first time he wondered if he had saved Zari's life, or if he had just changed it forever. Captain Elias Vance was used to chaos. He was used to long days filled with unexpected crises, maintenance failures, and political headaches. But what he wasn't used to was everything being perfect. It started with small things. His coffee was always hot and waiting for him when he arrived on the bridge. Reports he hadn't even gotten around to reading yet were summarized and placed neatly on his desk. By the third day, he barely had to lift a finger to manage his own schedule. Zari had somehow arranged his workload with mechanical precision, optimizing every aspect of his routine. And it was unnerving as hell. The bridge, the next morning. Elias stepped onto the command deck, a steaming cup of coffee already in his hand, because, of course, Zari had handed it to him the moment he left his quarters. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Rourke, arched an eyebrow as he took his seat. You're looking awfully refreshed, sir. Elias shot her a look over his coffee. Don't start. Rourke smirked. Hey, I'm just saying. It's weird seeing you this put together. You're usually running on 3 hours of sleep and a bad attitude. Before Elias could respond, the lift doors hissed open, and Zari strode onto the bridge. Every officer subtly straightened in their seats. They were still getting used to her presence. It wasn't just that she was an alien. There were plenty of aliens serving aboard Perseverance. It was the way she moved, fluid and utterly controlled, like a predator walking among prey. She stepped to Elias's side, her hands clasped behind her back. Your schedule for today has been adjusted, Captain. I have optimized your workload, removed unnecessary redundancies, and preemptively responded to all non-essential communications. Elias stared at her. Rourke snorted. So, Basically, you don't have to do anything today, sir. Zari tilted her head. Captain Elias Vance's time is valuable. It is my duty to ensure it is used efficiently. Rourke gave Elias a look that screamed, what the hell is going on? Elias let out a long sigh. Zari, I appreciate the effort. Really? But you don't have to micromanage my life. Zari's expression remained unreadable. You once expressed frustration over administrative duties. I have alleviated this burden. That's not the point, Elias said, leaning back in his chair. I don't mind doing my job. And besides, you're not even part of my crew. You don't have to do anything for me. Zari was silent for a long moment. Then, she said, do I displease you? Elias blinked. What? No, that's not. My purpose is to serve, she interrupted, her voice firm. If my actions are unsatisfactory, I will adjust accordingly. Rourke coughed under her breath. Wow, that's intense. Elias shot her a not-helping glare before turning back to Zari. You're not some kind of service bot, Zari. You don't have to adjust to my liking. You should be doing what you want. Zari's golden eyes flickered with something unreadable. What I want is to ensure your well-being. Elias exhaled. This wasn't going to be an easy conversation. Later that evening, captain's quarters. Elias had hoped that Zari would take his words to heart and ease up on the whole perfectly optimized servant routine. He was wrong. His room was immaculate. His meals were prepared before he even had a chance to think about being hungry. She had somehow analyzed his preferences so well that his environment was tailored to exactly what he would have chosen for himself. And that was the problem. She wasn't just helping. She was anticipating. She knew what he needed before he did. That kind of attention to detail was impossible. Unless, Elias set his glass down with a quiet clink. Zari, I need to ask you something. She turned from where she was seated near the window, watching the distant stars. Yes, Captain. He folded his arms. How are you doing all of this? Zari didn't hesitate. I study your behavior. I analyze patterns in your choices. I anticipate your desires based on probability and logic. That's not normal, Elias said carefully. Zari regarded him with an unwavering gaze. Among my people it is. A cold realization crept into Elias's gut. Zari, how far does this go? She tilted her head. Clarify. How far will you go to ensure my well-being? Zari was silent for a moment before responding. As far as necessary. Something about the way she said it made the hairs on the back of Elias's neck stand on end. He swallowed. Zari, have you done anything to anyone else on this ship? Anyone who you thought might be a threat to me? She didn't answer right away, and that silence told Elias everything he needed to know. His stomach tightened. Zari, what did you do? She met his gaze without a hint of remorse. I neutralized the diplomat from the Zorith Consortium. Elias's blood ran cold. What? He was attempting to manipulate you into an unfavorable trade agreement, she said calmly. I ensured he withdrew his proposal. Elias shot to his feet. What did you do to him? Zari didn't blink. I merely reminded him of his vulnerabilities. A strategic pressure point, nothing more. Elias ran a hand down his face. This was bad. Really bad. Zari, he said slowly, you can't just threaten people on my behalf. Her expression didn't change. You did not order me to. I acted of my own will. Elias stared at her. That was what unsettled him the most. She had acted on her own, and he was starting to realize just how dangerous that might be. Elias Vance had dealt with rogue AIs, pirate uprisings, and interstellar espionage. But none of those experiences had prepared him for this. Zari, the alien woman bound to him by an unshakable oath, had just admitted to threatening a high-ranking diplomat on his behalf, and she didn't seem to think there was anything wrong with it. Elias exhaled sharply, pacing his quarters. You cannot just intimidate people, Zari. That's not how things work. She stood at attention, her expression unreadable. I acted in your best interest. You think you did, he countered, running a hand through his hair. But you didn't ask me. You didn't let me handle it. He shook his head. You forced the outcome you thought was best. Zari's golden eyes flickered. Yes, Elias stared at her. That's not okay. She remained still. That was the problem. She wasn't malicious. She wasn't some scheming mastermind twisting events to her benefit. She genuinely, earnestly, believed that her actions were justified. Because that's what she had been trained to believe. Elias sat down heavily on the edge of his bed. He needed answers. Zari, he said carefully, you said this is how your people operate. That you're following some kind of ancient law. She nodded once. What exactly does that law say? Zari straightened. It is called the vow of devotion, a sacred covenant. When one of my kind is saved from death, our lives no longer belong to us. They belong to the one who saved us. It is not a choice. It is an instinct. Elias's stomach tightened. It goes beyond duty, she continued, beyond gratitude. It is fundamental to our identity. He swallowed. Zari, what happens if you don't fulfill the vow? For the first time, she hesitated. Elias leaned forward. Tell me. Her voice was softer when she answered. We break. A chill ran through him. Break. Zari's hands clenched at her sides. A VR who fails in their service experiences neural collapse. Our minds are not designed to exist without purpose. If we are denied our duty, we deteriorate. Slowly at first, then completely. Elias's breath caught in his throat. You're saying, you die if you don't serve me? She did not look away. Yes, a cold, sinking feeling settled in Elias's chest. This wasn't just about loyalty. It wasn't even just about duty. It was programming, genetic, biological, and he had no idea how to undo it. Later that night, Elias sat at his desk, staring at the bottle of whiskey Zari had brought him days ago. He hadn't touched it since learning the truth. How the hell was he supposed to handle this? He had never asked for this responsibility. He had saved her because it was the right thing to do, not because he wanted a devoted, hyper-competent guardian who would rewire her entire life around his every need. And the worst part? She wasn't miserable. She wasn't fighting against her instincts. She was content. She had chosen this, even if that choice had been hardwired into her people. A quiet knock at his door made him exhale. Come in. Zari stepped inside, moving with her usual silent grace. You have not rested. Elias ran a hand down his face. Not in the mood for sleep. She regarded him for a moment. You are troubled. No kidding. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. Zari. Is there any way to break the vow without harming you? She hesitated. There is one. Elias's head snapped up. What is it? Zari's golden eyes met his. I must be given a new purpose. One that is equal to or greater than my duty to you. Elias sat back, considering that. And who decides what qualifies as equal or greater? She placed a hand over her heart. I do. That complicated things. He could order her to do anything. He could tell her to leave, to live her own life. But unless she believed in that purpose as strongly as she believed in serving him, it wouldn't work. He exhaled slowly. Zari, what do you want? For the first time, she looked uncertain. I do not know, she admitted. Elias nodded. That's what scares me. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Elias stood. I can't keep letting this go on, Zari. You're not a tool. You're a person. And I won't let you sacrifice yourself just because of some ancient code. She watched him closely. Then what will you do? Elias met her gaze. I'm going to give you a choice. Elias stood there, his heart racing. He had been ready to make a decision, to give Zari an order that would put an end to this dangerous cycle. But now, with her staring at him like a cornered animal, something inside him hesitated. He wasn't sure if it was the intensity of her gaze or the weight of what he was about to do, but he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about her. It wasn't even about the vow of devotion anymore. This was about him. Elias crossed his arms, trying to find the right words. Zari, I need you to understand something. She stood unmoving, waiting. You don't have to serve me, Elias said firmly, his voice steady. You don't have to follow this vow out of some deep-rooted instinct. You've already made it clear you'll do anything to ensure I'm safe, but I didn't ask for that. And I don't want it. Her golden eyes flickered. But you are my responsibility. No, Elias interrupted, taking a step forward. I'm not. You've been programmed to think that way, but you're not just a tool to be used. I'm not something you need to protect at all costs. You're a person. You deserve more than being shackled to an oath you didn't choose. Zaria's expression softened, but there was still a glint of confusion in her gaze. She looked like a creature who had been raised in a cage, unsure of how to survive in the world outside. I don't know what else to be, she said quietly, almost to herself. Elias's stomach clenched. She was broken, in a way, not just by her vow, but by the very nature of her existence. And that's why I'm giving you a choice, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. I'm not asking you to abandon me. I'm asking you to find out what you want, independent of me. What you truly want for yourself. Zari stood motionless, her chest rising and falling with every shallow breath. It was like she was considering a question she hadn't ever been asked before. You're free, Elias said, taking a deep breath. And that means you can choose to stay if you want to. Or you can leave. I'll never hold it against you, but you need to make that decision for yourself. I'm not your master, and I'm not your ruler. I'm just a man who doesn't want to see you suffer anymore. The silence between them stretched longer than he expected, and Elias began to wonder if he had made a huge mistake. Was he asking too much? Was he forcing her into a position where her very identity would collapse? He didn't know. Finally, Zari spoke. I don't know what I want, she whispered, her voice full of uncertainty. I've always known my duty, my place, but I have never considered what it would mean to live outside of that. Elias could feel his pulse in his throat. Then we'll figure it out together. But I won't keep you here if it's not your choice. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. You deserve that freedom. Her golden eyes flickered, an emotion Elias couldn't quite place flashing in them. For a moment, he thought she might refuse, might cling to the vow that had shaped every fiber of her being. But instead, she nodded slowly. I will think on it, she said, her voice distant, but softer than before. It is not an easy thing to cast aside a life spent in service, Captain. Elias swallowed. I know, but I believe you can do it. She looked at him for a long time. Then quietly she spoke. If I were to leave, she trailed off, almost as if testing the words. What would I do? Where would I go? Elias's mind raced. This wasn't some simple decision, this was a matter of identity, of existence. He didn't know what the world had to offer her. Hell, he didn't even know what he wanted for himself, but he knew that whatever path she chose, it would have to be hers. I don't know, he said finally, but you have a whole universe in front of you. You don't have to be bound by anything anymore. You can start over. Do what makes you happy. Zaria's lips parted as if she was about to say something more, but then her gaze shifted to the window, out toward the stars beyond. I have never known happiness, she whispered, almost to herself. Only duty. Only service. I don't know what I would be outside of that. Elias took a step closer, his heart heavy with empathy. And that's okay. I don't expect you to know right away. I just want you to have the choice. She remained silent, her gaze still fixed on the endless stretch of space. Zaria's life, her very essence, had been twisted into a singular purpose. And now Elias had opened a door for her. A door that she hadn't even known existed. The question now was whether she would have the courage to step through it. The next day, Elias woke early, as he usually did, but the weight on his shoulders was heavier than usual. Zaria's words from the night before lingered in his mind. I have never known happiness. He hadn't been able to sleep well, wondering if he had made the right decision. What if he had just set her on a path that led to more pain? What if her sense of purpose disintegrated, and she couldn't find her way back from that? But as the sun rose and the day began, Elias felt a strange sense of hope. He had done something that needed to be done. He had given Zari the gift of choice. Whether or not she realized it yet, it was a step toward something better. He stood from his desk, heading for the bridge, trying to shake the uncertainty off. But when he entered, he was met with a surprising sight. Zari was already there. She stood by the console, gazing out at the stars with an expression that was almost serene. For the first time, she looked like she wasn't bound to the shadows of duty. She looked free. Elias's heart skipped a beat. "I've made my choice, Captain." The words hung in the air like a fragile promise. Zari had made her choice. Elias's pulse quickened, but he did his best to hide his nerves. "What did you decide?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, as though speaking too loudly would break the delicate moment between them. Zari turned slowly, her golden eyes meeting his with a strange intensity. There was a softness in her gaze now, one that had never been there before, a glimmer of something new, something human even. "I will stay," she said simply, the words calm, yet filled with an underlying conviction. Elias's heart skipped a beat. "You'll stay?" "Yes." Her voice was steady, resolute. "But not as I was before. I choose to serve you, yes, but not because I am bound by the vow. I choose to serve because I want to, because it is my decision now. My purpose will be shaped by my choice, not by the chains of a vow I never made." Elias felt something shift deep within him. This was the moment. She wasn't free in the traditional sense. Not yet, at least, but this was the start of a new chapter. A chapter where she was the one in control of her future. "I'm honored," Elias said, his voice thick with emotion. "But you don't have to stay because you think it's what I want." Zari cut him off, stepping closer. "I know, Captain. I know." The sincerity in her eyes took him aback. Elias could see that she wasn't just speaking to placate him. She had thought this through, carefully weighing her options and deciding what she wanted, not what was expected of her. And in that moment, Elias realized that this was something far greater than he had anticipated. It wasn't just about her serving him or fulfilling some long-standing duty. This was about mutual respect, the foundation for a true partnership. "You've already given me a gift," Zari continued. "You gave me the choice I never thought I would have. To think beyond my programming, to question my existence. And for that I am grateful." Elias's throat tightened. He had done something for her, yes, but what Zari was offering him now was something he hadn't expected. Trust. He swallowed hard. "I'm glad. But this isn't just about me, Zari. It's about you. About your freedom to choose. You have that now." Her gaze softened. "I know. And I'll find my own way. My service to you, it will be different now. I'll protect you, not because I must, but because I want to." Elias took a step forward, his heart swelling. "You don't have to protect me at all. I want to," she said again, her voice low and steady. "But in return, I'll need you to protect me too. From myself. From the parts of me that still cling to the old way." Elias blinked, surprised. "You want me to protect you?" She nodded. "From the weight of this choice. From the fear of losing myself again. I'm not completely free, not yet. But with your help, I'll get there." The vulnerability in her voice struck Elias like a punch to the gut. He had spent so long trying to save her from her own existence, trying to fix her, but now he understood. He couldn't do it alone. Zari was choosing to walk this path alongside him, and in doing so, she was giving him something far more precious than anything he could have given her. "You have my word," he said firmly, the words carrying the full weight of his promise. "I won't let you fall back into that darkness. We'll figure this out together." For the first time, a genuine smile tugged at the corners of Zari's lips. It was small, tentative, but it was there, and it made something shift inside Elias, like a key turning in a lock. "I don't know what the future holds, Captain," Zari said softly, "but I do know that I want to find out. With you." Elias couldn't suppress a smile of his own. "Then let's find out together." Days later, the Perseverance glided through the endless expanse of space, its engines humming with quiet efficiency. On the bridge, Elias sat at the helm, his fingers hovering over the controls. He could feel the weight of his responsibility more than ever, but it was a different kind of weight now. One that felt right. Beside him, Zari stood at attention, her golden eyes scanning the stars, her posture unyielding yet at peace. She no longer looked like a creature trapped in an endless cycle of duty. Now, she looked like someone who was beginning to understand her place in the vast universe. Elias glanced over at her. "How are you feeling?" Zari's gaze softened as she met his eyes. "For the first time, I feel whole." The words made something inside Elias settle. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and in some strange way so was he. "Good," Elias said, a sense of calm washing over him. "We'll keep moving forward, step by step." Together, Zari nodded, her lips curling into the faintest of smiles. Together, and for the first time, Elias felt truly free as well. Free from the fear of making a wrong choice. Free from the weight of responsibility that had once been suffocating. Now, the future was an open road. A future that, with Zari by his side, no longer seemed so daunting. The end. Thanks for watching, everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stellar HFY content. Ring that bell to stay updated, and we'll see you next time.